I was thinking about how I could use an IEP as an artifact of my growth this year, and I quickly realised that it's not actually the IEP that shows my learning. It is, in fact, the whole process that I went through to create the IEP. So, what I've decided to cover this in this artifact is actually the process that I go through before, during, and after the IEP, and how that covers most, if not all, of the competencies in our practicum. So here is the first record I did of my thinking, and as you can see, it's a bit of a mess. There's notes everywhere, ideas everywhere, but it really shows that I was thinking about the whole process that I go through, and then linking that to the domains and the competencies. So what I've decided to do is tidy it up a little bit. I've just basically redone my diagram, but spread it out on the next couple of slides, and I'm going to talk you through it. So now we look at the process that I go through, or the actions that I take before the IEP meeting. And that starts right back at the beginning over here when a student joins my caseload. So how I've approached this is I've written a few key notes, but I've also written the domains and the competencies in orange so that you can see how this process addresses so many competencies. I will be referring to my notes at times just to link in with the competencies, so sorry if I take a little bit of time to do that, but just want to make sure that I clearly explain everything. So looking back, right back here when a student joins my caseload, I thought about what do I do first when I get given that student's name on a piece of paper, and I realised that the first thing I do is I establish a running file for my student, and this actually addresses Domain 1 Competency 3 for identifying efficient and effective systems for managing the workload. And in a running file, as you'll see in the domain pages, is where I keep things like the student's profile form, which includes details about their address, their phone number, their birth date, their NSN number, the school they attend, their teacher's name, their principal, their hearing aids, the hearing aid serial numbers, whether or not they have an FM, their degree of hearing loss. So I keep a profile form in there. I keep their audiological records, an audiogram, and any other records we've had or letters we've had from the audiologist. It's where I keep their assessment once I undertake that, and I keep all their planning and their IEP. So the running file is really just the one place where I can pick up and go. It's got everything in there that I need for my student. And once I've, or as I'm establishing that running file, I also familiarise myself with the student's audiogram. So this comes under domain 4, competency 4, which is to interpret reports from other professionals who work with students who are deaf and hearing impaired. So as I'm preparing my running file, I transfer the copy of the audiogram that I have from the audiologist, and I move it onto a template that includes a speech banana. And that's just so that I feel more equipped to explain that audiogram to others. The other thing that I do or I look at is this understanding the impact of hearing loss. So I look over the application that was made to the RTD service and look at where the student is at in terms of their academic results. We get their reading, writing and maths results, and also the teacher's comments about socially and developmentally where the student's at. So I can just have a think about how is that hearing loss impacting on this student. So that's a really an interesting part of setting up and getting those students onto my caseload. And I think it is all this part here that allows me to start being culturally responsive. I start to really focus on the individual child. I find out their culture here when I look at their information, and I can really start to think about what is this child's needs and where do I need to go from here. So the next step, moving on to, is building relationships, and this comes across as a really key thing for me personally. in the whole RTD job. The relationships are so important, and that's the next step that I go on to. So I introduce myself to the parents, the school, and the student, and again this covers a number of the competencies actually, but the key one that I thought was Domain 3, Competency 3, which is demonstrating cultural responsiveness when working with professionals, parents, families and whānau. So I need to really think about the culture of the school, how I approach them, and the culture of the parents. So for example, one of my students is a Samoan girl, and so I approach her family differently in that I arrive for a visit to the home, and that tends to be the most effective way that I have found to work with particularly this particular family, but I've also been told that for a lot of the Pacifica families, coming to the home is the way to approach them, whereas some other parents I may send an email, I may contact via phone, so it just depends. I really think about what might be best for this family, and if the student has had a RTD the year before, then I will often check in with that RTD and find out what worked for that family last year. At the same time as I introduce myself to the parents in the school, I also outline the role of the RTD, and this addresses Domain 4, Competency 3, which is to provide informational sessions to others about the role of a teacher of the deaf and the diversity of learners who are deaf. So at this time I supply my schools or my teachers with a copy of the student's audiogram, and I outline what the impact of hearing loss is, this child's particular hearing loss is, and what that may look like in the classroom. Also at that time when I meet the schools, I also sit down with generally the Senko, and we clarify the roles and responsibilities between team members. So this looks at Domain 4, Competency 2, which is collaborating and supporting the programs of others. So by defining and clarifying our roles, we ensure that the collaboration works well, that no one's standing on each other's toes, and that all jobs are getting done and everyone knows their responsibilities. So KDEC actually have a specific roles and responsibilities form that I use, so I've included that as an artefact on the domain pages. So it's a really good way to follow through that process. Also at that initial meeting with the Senko, I identify or work with them to identify an appropriate space to work, and this one looks at Domain 6, Competency 5, which is adapting environments for learners who are deaf to meet their individual needs. So in terms of that room, there are a few things that I make sure. So I particularly ask for a quiet room where there's limited background noise. So that means maybe away from the other classes, or at least with a good acoustic environment. And also we look at things in terms of the visual noise or the visual distraction. A lot of the classrooms these days are glass, and so if I'm working with a student and we're in a glass room, they're often distracted watching their friends, seeing what everyone else is doing, and it's not the most effective environment for them to be learning in. So that's that area. That all comes around kind of that build relationships and introducing myself. Looking at the next step that I go through is I share knowledge, and this I've kind of covered up here in the outline of the RTD role, but I often go through it again once I've established that relationship with the teacher and we've built a bit of rapport. I again go through explaining the audiogram to them so that they have a really good understanding of what their child can hear and what they can do to better meet the needs of their child. So that covers interpreting reports from others and also collaborating and supporting the programs of the classroom teacher, helping them understand. I think that's a really important step, because there's little tips that they might not know, even things such as which side to sit. If you're completing a running record with your student, which is their best ear for listening. So that's a really good opportunity to sit down and go through those things with them. And it's at this point that we also have the mainstream teachers course, which as you can see covers a lot of domains and competencies. And this is a really key opportunity for us to offer professional development to our teachers and share with them the knowledge that we have around hearing loss. So that's explaining the different types of hearing loss, the implications of hearing loss. They particularly look at their child's hearing loss again, and also looking at tips for in the classroom and different strategies that they can use to meet the needs of their student with hearing loss. There's also a bit of a discussion around the technical aspect or the assistive tech, so the hearing aids, the FMs, and so that's another important aspect. So this whole aspect of sharing knowledge is a really key part of my role as well. After that, so I work with the child. This isn't, there's some time in here where I just work with my student and get to know them and further build this relationship. This building relationships is an ongoing process. But then I start to gather knowledge about my students. So that's looking at identifying their learning needs. So there's some key assessments that we undertake as resource teachers of the deaf, and you'll see more about those covered on the Domain 5 page. And as you can see, this meets a lot of the goals for Domain 5 here, and also some Domain 6, 1, 3 and 4 competencies. So there's lots of different competencies addressed in the assessment of my students. I need to think about being culturally responsive. I need to make sure I have an understanding of these specialist assessments. I need to collaborate with the families and share that information, and also collaborate with the classroom teachers about the assessment data that they have. And I need to be able to adapt, think about what comes out of the assessment and adapting the instructional strategies to better meet the needs of the child. So this is where there's a lot of formal and informal assessment that goes on. And I also undertake classroom observations quite early on in the process. So I arrange to visit the classroom and just watch how my student interacts with others, the language that they use, in terms of their oral language, but also pragmatics, how they interact socially with other children. And I also observe the classroom environment, again thinking about the acoustics, the background noise, things that the teachers can do, for example artwork over the windows, in order to reduce the reverberation. So there's lots of things that I feed back to the teacher here about after my classroom observation. Moving on to the next step, so this is where I identify some of my students' learning needs. So I look at what can my student do, what are their strengths, and from that I look at where we need to go. So what are the gaps that we need to fill in to move this child forward? And that's from my perspective. I then move into collaborating, and here I collaborate with the SENCO to establish a meeting time, and we discuss when that might work in terms of for the school. So does that need to be an after school meeting? Is the teacher able to be released? How is that going to work? After that, I, depending on whose role and responsibility it was up here, either myself or the SENCO will contact the parents and check when suits the parents best, because as we all know, to have a truly collaborative IEP, the parents need to be involved. So getting the parents on board is really important, and I'm willing to change my timetable around in any way I can in order to make sure that the parents in the school can all be there. So that's one thing that I'm quite clear on, is as long as I have time to let other schools know, I will make changes to my timetable, and I'm more than happy to attend before school and after school meetings. So this Friday just been, I had one at 7:45 in the morning, but that suited Dad before work, and it worked with the teacher before she had to be in class. So I'm happy to make it work any way I can. So this is where we liaise over the strengths, needs and the goals. So I often visit parents at home excuse me, prior to the IEP meeting, just to discuss what their aspirations are for their child. So the things that they think their child needs to work on, what they would like the focus to be, and just to go over with them what will happen at the IEP, what the process looks like. And I find that this gives the parents more confidence at the meeting because they have an idea of how to have a voice at the meeting. And this covers, again, a lot of the competencies that are listed down here. I won't go through them all because they're all referred to, and you'll find further information on the next few pages, on the domain pages. So as I note here, that's working with teachers and parents to go through and collaborate prior to the meeting. Then I gather all my information in preparation for the IEP, so I prepare an assessment summary, and that includes the assessments that I've completed, some informal observations that I've noted, and I'll also often incorporate notes from my discussions with the classroom teacher and the parents. And I collaborate to get this information, and then I share that information, so I will distribute copies of that to the teacher and the parents, either prior to the meeting or at the meeting, just so everyone can see what I'm talking to and where I'm coming from. So then we move on to the IEP meeting, and obviously the actual IEP meeting again includes a number of competencies and domains. One of the key things I think is that the IEP meeting is a great opportunity for me to demonstrate my cultural responsiveness, and working in partnership with the parents and the school is a key aspect here, and also acknowledging the specific culture of my student and of my family, so giving them a voice and involving them in the IEP meeting. And this, as I've noted here, all the different things. So it's collaborating with other parties, advisors might be present, SLTs, cochlear rehabilitationists, classroom teachers. So there's lots of different things that go on in that meeting. We discuss assistive tech, which covers off domain 6, competency 7. So lots of competencies covered in the actual meeting, the holding of the meeting. Just want to draw your attention up here to these overarching competencies that I've noted up here. Is the engaging in professional development is something that continues, what underpins my whole role as a RTD. So that's providing professional development for others in terms of that mainstream teachers course, engaging in professional development opportunities for staff at staff meetings, and also taking up opportunities to engage in professional development myself. So we have a lot of in-house training that continues throughout this whole process, and also CADEC conferences. I engage in some online additional learning, which I've shared in future in the domain pages. So that's kind of an overarching competency. Also is this supportive use of assistive tech. Throughout this whole process, I work with my students to ensure that their hearing aids are functioning, working effectively. I encourage their self-management of these in terms of remembering to use them, cleaning them, changing batteries and ordering batteries themselves. I also check or undertake the ling sounds, the 6 ling sounds every time I see my students. So that just ensures that the hearing aid, that their technology is working effectively. In terms of other assistive tech such as FMs or RMs, I work with teachers when I'm in. Is it working properly? Are they using it? Are they wearing it at the correct height? How are they finding it in the group? And encouraging my children to use that as well. Also, the code of ethics is a fundamental aspect of all my practice. So ensuring that I'm aware of that and meeting that code of ethics at all times. And the last two ones here are just in terms of collaboration. My role is all about collaboration, and that's one of the competencies. I'm constantly collaborating with colleagues, families, classroom teachers, advisors, audiologists. So it's all collaboration is what my role is. And cultural responsiveness is another one that I need to be aware of at all times, and really think about the individual I'm working with and not make assumptions, just approach each individual as an individual and in order to work with them in the most suitable way. So now I'm looking at after the IEP meeting, and again, what occurs in my practice after the meeting covers a lot of the domains and the competencies as well. So generally after the meeting, one of the first things that occurs is sharing the IEP with the different parties. So that means going through with the teacher aides, the teachers, the parents and the SENCOs to check that it is a fair representation of what we discussed at the meeting, and that the IEP meets the needs of the students and addresses the hopes and the aspirations of everyone involved. So sharing the IEP and having open, honest communication, and also working with teacher aides to support them in implementing aspects of the IEP. This is particularly important if the student, on my caseload, is an OARS student, as they will often have an OARS funded teacher aide. So that becomes part of my role to ensure that the teacher aide is upskilled in how to meet the needs of a student with hearing loss. So that's these competencies up here that are covered there. And this Domain 6 Competency 1 is that ensuring that all instruction is based on assessment, evidence-based practice, and the goals of the learners and their families. So that there is teaching to the IEP goals. So making sure that all instruction for the hearing impaired student is working towards achieving the goals in the IEP. And that's where, looking here, plan and teach to IEP goals, as you'll see in some of the domain pages, some examples of my planning where the weekly learning goals directly relate to the overall IEP goals. And that's because meeting that Domain 6 Competency 1 is that those goals in the IEP are based on the goals of the learners and their families, and it's based on assessment. So by doing that, I'm meeting that competency and ensuring that all my planning and teaching addresses those things. Another competency addressed here within my planning and teaching is Domain 2 Competency 1 regarding reflection. So making sure that in order to make sure that I'm continuing to meet the needs of my students is that I engage regularly in reflective practice. And again, you'll see this in the examples of my planning where I evaluate my sessions and often note down things that went well, things that I needed to continue to work on, new things that I identified as needing some work, or things that my student picked up on quickly and we could move on. So this evaluating, reflecting and modifying is a key part of my practice here as well. Again, coming back to this communication and collaboration, which I addressed previously as an overarching aspect of the IEP process, continues throughout, and that's this communication with the different parties. So I regularly keep in touch with home, my classroom teachers and teacher aides, depending on the student. Perhaps I'm in touch with the AODCs, the advisors, or a CI habilitationist, and in some cases an SLT. So it's that collaboration with all those parties, making sure that I'm supporting their work in any way I can. For example, working with the CI habilitationist, she will often leave notes of what she identified as the student's needs, and as the RTD, because I'm in there more, she tends to visit once a fortnight, whereas I will visit twice a week. So I'm able to consolidate and continue working on what she focused on in her session. So I collaborate and support those programs of others who also work with my child. And then we come to here where basically the process starts again. So we go back to continuing to gather, back to gathering the knowledge, doing observations, meeting with the family, meeting with the student, and we have a review meeting. So we're back at the beginning, and I feel when I thought about how I would present this artefact, I thought about presenting it in a circle, because I feel that it's really just a never-ending cycle. It keeps going around and around, and we keep working from through the different steps, but this is how I originally saw the process, as a before at the meeting and after, and so I've decided to present it like this. Just in summary, I've highlighted some of the key things, or pulled out some of the key things that I see as being fundamental to the IEP process. These are collaboration, organisation, communication, knowledge, culturally responsive practice, and high expectations and goals. I've just got there as well rangatiratanga and whanaungatanga, and that just touches on some of the other learning we've done throughout the course. So rangatiratanga is about the leadership or the self-management, and that's a big part of this IEP process, particularly working in deaf education. One of KDEC's requirements is that we have an IEP, and some of the schools are still yet to get on board to the same extent as KDEC. So having the leadership skills and the ability to bring the schools on board is a really important aspect. And the other one, whanaungatanga, that's really about the relationships. And an IEP is not an IEP without the relationships. It's all about collaboration and strengthening that group, or strengthening that all those people who are working around the child, and making sure that each of those people, the child, all the professionals, the family and the whānau, that they all have a sense of belonging, and that they're all there together and working as a team in collaboration really serves to strengthen each member of the group. And so that's where I think that whanaungatanga and rangatiratanga really fit when looking at the IEP process.